Hi, everyone. Bob Dietrich here, back again on another episode of the ADHD Toolbox. And today I'm super excited to have a gentleman with us named Brenden Mahan. And Brendan's been around quite a while. He's worked with teachers and schools and helping with children's behavior with ADHD. Brenden, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Bob. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And I hear you have lots of stuff going on. Give us a little background about yourself, and we'll kind of dig into how your processes can help parents and teachers handle and help children with their behavior in school and at home.
Yeah, so I started off as a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and my teaching experience goes all the way back to my sophomore year in high school when I was an intern in a like an experimental program where high school kids got to go intern in elementary school classrooms that was only allowed for seniors, but someone quit and I asked, so I got to start it my sophomore year.
Nice.
And that led, like, I went to college and sort of wandered off in more of the English and writing direction, dabbled in psychology. Like any good ADHD person, I had 3 majors in college. But I ended up graduating with a degree in creative writing, which sort of circled back to me becoming an English teacher, because that interest in working with kids never really left me. So I've been like a summer camp counselor and after school program guy and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually a classroom teacher, working primarily in 5th and 6th grade, both as a general teacher and also as a English teacher.
Right.
And
Go ahead.
And that eventually led to me working with ADHD, because the kids that I enjoyed working with the most were boys in 6th grade who had ADHD. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm the only person on the planet that's who they want to work with. But that was my thing that I enjoyed the most as a teacher. And eventually schools just didn't have enough money, and I kind of bounced around a little bit and decided to leave the profession because I wasn't keeping a job long enough, because every time I landed in a new district, they lost money apparently. And so I ended up going back to school. I got a second master's degree in school counseling. My other is in education. And then was either going to be a guidance counselor or an ADHD coach, one or the other. And I ended up doing the ADHD coach road. So I work with families. I work with individuals, usually like college kids and adults in career transition or struggling at their jobs. Every now and then I work with younger kids. Mm-hmm. Usually if I'm working with younger kids, it's really the family that I'm working with. Mm-hmm. I provide parent coaching groups online. I've got a group starting up in March. And I also do professional developments. So sort of what we're going to talk about today, only I do it in schools and mental health clinician offices and businesses and just some of that neurodiversity stuff. And a lot of it is really around management of staff, of school kids, of you name it. And then I also have a podcast called ADHD Essentials that people are more than welcome to listen to. As of this recording, I have like 111 episodes posted. So it's been going for a while. And I'm looking forward to having you on as soon as we can arrange it.
Awesome. And so you have ADHD Essentials. You went from being a teacher and working in that arena to going off on your own. Mm-hmm. Why did you wind up going off on your own and going into ADHD Essentials?
Honestly, a lot of it was because I kept getting cut from teaching positions. And to teach well, you have to keep a curriculum for many, many years, because you kind of have to figure out how to manage a classroom and then figure out how to execute the curriculum and then figure out how to make the curriculum better so that you can execute it more effectively. And then eventually you become a really, really good teacher. And I just never kept a curriculum long enough. So I got the classroom management stuff down, but I didn't get the experience of having a curriculum for like 5-6 years and really tweaking it and improving it and that kind of stuff. And I recognized that my growth as a teacher was being stunted as a result, but I also recognized that I was really good at working with kids. And so that was why I went back to school looking at guidance counseling and also dabbling part-time with the ADHD work. Because by then I had my adult ADHD diagnosis. That caused me to reflect back on my experience as a teacher and those kids that I like to work with and how well I understood them and got what their issues were, because they were me. And in guidance counseling, there's just not that many positions available. So I took what felt like a backup plan of ADHD and turned it into the primary plan. And I love it. I would rather not go back into schools at this point. Although last year I was corralled into being a principal for a little while.
Yeah. So many adults with ADHD are entrepreneurs, and it really seems to fit. That seems to be a common theme. And what I'd like to hear from you is why, how you think entrepreneurship fits. Why is it such a good fit with people with ADHD?
Honestly, I think it's because you are in charge of yourself.
Hmm.
And if you can do it, which not everybody can.
Hmm.
So with that caveat, but
Yeah.
if you can do it, if you can hold yourself accountable and self motivate and all that kind of stuff, then the risk of disappointment and that sort of cliff that you fall off of when you mess up at work and your boss is upset with you and then you get overwhelmed and then you mess up more and the next thing you know, you're getting fired.
Hmm.
You don't do that to yourself, right? And one of the things we're going to talk about today is the idea of accountable forgiveness.
Hmm.
And that's why I think folks with ADHD are successful as entrepreneurs, is because we're able to hold ourselves accountable for the mistakes that we make, but we're also able to forgive ourselves for the mistakes that we make. And depending on your boss, when you're working for someone else, you may or may not get that forgiveness side. And if you don't get that forgiveness side, it's really easy to spiral out of control.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny because even online, I signed up for this program, and they give you a coaching session inside of the program, and they say if you're late for this program, you'll never get another chance to sign up. It's like this is definitely not for people with ADHD because you might be late, you might miss the program, if you don't have those executive function strategies in place, it's a good chance you'll miss those things. And I
Yeah,
know.
I always start my workshops 5 minutes late.
There you go. There
I'm
you
like,
go.
it's an ADHD workshop. It's not supposed to start on time. It would be completely inappropriate for me to start this thing on time. Let's let
You know,
people trickle in.
as you were saying, you got diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. How did that come about, if you don't mind me asking?
Because I was struggling at work. Yeah, because I was struggling as a teacher and recognizing that the areas that I was struggling in were the detail stuff and the ADHD kind of stuff. When I started in college and was a psych major, ADHD was the only thing that I sort of self-diagnosed myself with. There's that Psych 101 joke about how you think you have everything that you learn about. And
Yeah.
the only one that struck me as true was ADHD. And I was just kind of like, okay, I guess I have ADHD, whatever. And didn't really think about it again until I was in my early to mid 30s.
And then you got formally diagnosed?
Yeah, yeah. I had I had sort of like I kind of went to my doctor and was like, I think I have ADHD. Can I get medication? And he was like, well, you're a teacher and know more than I do, so sure. Which is not the way you're supposed to do it. I know now, but didn't know then.
Mhm.
Um, and then as my life progressed, I sort of learned more and more about it and started studying it and researching it, and that led to the expertise that I eventually fostered. Some of which was because I worked with an ADHD coach and a clinician, for that matter, both of whom said to me, you understand this at a level that people can't understand it if they don't have it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Well, I think it's fantastic that you're doing ADHD Essentials, the podcast, and people can find you, by the way, at ADHDessentials.com. They can sign up for the podcast there. You have a ton of subscribers and growing every day. And so we're excited to have you on. And I know from doing these interviews that you just learn so much from these experts. I mean, so much that you absorb. And when you and I talked, we could have gone in so many different directions, but I wanted to ask your expertise and get your expertise around, specifically around classrooms.
mhm.
And how do we help teachers? Because that's an area where I can see teachers being out in the field. I can see teachers struggling more and more with how to, help their children with ADHD, because there seems to be more children out there, and they could really use some strategies. So we decided to focus on that. So today we're going to talk about 5 ways to improve your kids' behavior in school. But as it turns out, that the strategies that work at school also work at home. So these are for strategies for at school and at home. So both teachers and parents can use these. So let's jump into those. And thank you for bringing these up. Let's just jump right in. What are the 5 strategies that you'd like to share with us that really work well?
The first one is that values are better than rules,
Mhm.
right? And and this is a trap I fell into as a teacher and then didn't fall into as a parent because I was a teacher before I was a parent. It's really easy to write rules and say you can do this, you can't do that, and blah, 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 blah. But when you've got especially kids with ADHD, it's going to go in one of two ways. Either they're going to want all of the rules to be followed consistently all of the time.
Mhm.
That especially the gifted kids tend to fall into that camp. And if they're not, then they're going to start breaking the rules and getting frustrated by the rules because how come it's not the same and it's not consistent? Or they're just going to immediately chafe at the rules and they're going to be like, I don't like this. I don't want rules. Rules are stupid. What do you mean I can't sit at my desk during read aloud? Why do I have to sit at the rug?
Right.
And well, let's go with that rule because it's a pretty straightforward one that happens in a lot of elementary school classrooms, right? Like if it's read aloud time, and even in middle school it happens sometimes. Everybody sits at the rug, y'all kind of read together, except there's always that one kid who wants to stay at their desk. And they usually get forced to come join the group.
Right.
Because that's the rule. But why? That's a dumb rule unless it's supporting a value. And the value is not reading. The value is not doing what you're told. That's just rules. The value is community. The value is connectedness to the class. And if you're sitting way over in the back of the room at your desk while everyone else is up at the rug listening to the story, you're disconnecting yourself from the class. So that's why we have that rule, but it doesn't have to be a rule. It can be expressed as a value. And we can say, in this classroom, we value our connectedness to one another, or we value our community, or we value the team, or however you want to phrase it. And now there's a reason for that rule to exist, but it's so good we don't even need the rule.
Mhm.
We don't have to say it. We can just, when that kid sits at their desk, we can look at them and go, is that supporting our value of community?
Yeah.
And the kid was probably going to go, no. And then hopefully as a teacher, we go, all right, well, usually that kid does support that value. So what's going on?
Mhm.
Maybe that kid's having a hard day. Maybe something's happening there. Or if that kid always wants to sit by themselves, also, what's going on? How come this kid is having trouble with this value? As opposed to, why is this kid so defiant? How come this kid never listens to what we say to do?
Right.
If we look at things through the lens of values, the conversation changes. Because we're not just assuming that they're like a bad kid or whatever. We can start to wonder, how come this value isn't working for that kid?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot. And it makes so much sense because the rules are something that kids tend to bump their heads against. But the values, it's like they're almost, I want to say peer pressure, but it's more than that. It's like inclusion. They want to be included. They already want to
Mm-hmm.
be included. So,
And they're flexible
right.
and they can apply to lots of different areas, right? Like if you're doing group work and one kid is just being a jerk, hey,
Right.
is this part of our value of community? Are you supporting our values right now?
Got it.
Or if the value is hard work, you can ask the same question
Right.
and you're still addressing the same behavior.
Right.
And you're creating this moment of reflection, right? Which may or may not get the kid to do what you want in the moment, but they're going to think about it eventually. It's in the long term, it's going to have more of an impact. Whereas rules don't create that same kind of reflection. They're just, oh, I just didn't listen to that rule, or I'm a bad kid. There's much more judgment that comes in with rules. And that doesn't happen as much with values. It certainly still can, but
Right.
it doesn't have to. And values lend themselves to different things than just judgment.
Yeah, I love how it's flexible because it doesn't. It's not just around circle time. It's around lunch. It's around recess. It's around any kind of group activity where
Mm-hmm.
values with community, etc. So
And,
yeah, awesome.
and and if you do it right,
Hmm.
you only need like 3, 4, maybe 5 values, and you pretty much cover everything.
Right. You just list them on the board and keep them there all year.
Yeah, and as we know, kids with ADHD, they struggle with remembering stuff.
Right.
If there's 25 rules, I'm going to forget those rules. But
Right.
if there's 4 or 5 values, I'm going to remember that stuff. And I might not always apply them right, but I'll remember what they are. And if
Right.
my teacher comes over and says, or my parents, hey, which of our values are you kind of struggling with right now? Or which value are you supporting right now? They're going to be able to say it.
Plus, with 4 or 5, three, 4 or 5, you can easily recite them every day in just a couple minutes to help, indoctrinate the children into that mindset.
Right.
Awesome. Love that. Okay. Values over rules, shorter list, broader spectrum, easier to apply. That's fantastic. What's number 2?
A predictable environment helps kids do the right thing.
Okay.
It's critical. If kids don't know what to do, they're not going to be able to do it. And so we want to have those values posted so we know what's going on. And we know where to look if someone asks us, hey, what value are you really doing a great job of showing me right now? I don't remember the values right now, but if I look over in the corner of the board, there they are. And I can just read them and try to figure it out. And the same is true in the classroom with things like homework, right? If you write the homework in the same place on the board every single day, and I'm sure 98% of the teachers listening do that, then the kids are going to know what to look for and where to look so that they can find out what the homework is. If you have a consistent place where you turn homework in, that's a solid plan, especially if it's not your desk. Like teachers, some of us love to get the homework put on our desk. It's a little chaotic. It doesn't really feel like a place that's just designed for homework. And so a kid might not turn their homework in over there. Also, potentially, that's close to you, and they might not want to turn the homework in if you're nearby because they might know they did a bad job on it, so they'd rather turn it in somewhere else. When I taught, I called it the pass it in bin, and it was just a bin that the kids put their homework in, and it was like far away from me so that they could all go over there and turn it in. And it also opened up the ability of them to misplace it, your ADHD kids maybe, and halfway through class they realize where it is and then they turn it in later. But that consistency and predictability of the environment is useful. And that's true at home too, right? Where do my shoes go? Where does my coat go? Let's make it consistent and reliable. And related to that is just events, because that's another thing that can be predictable. What are we doing during the course of the day, and when are we doing it? What's the sequence of events? The more clear that is, the less anxiety our kids are going to experience. And the less anxiety, the more success they're going to find.
Right. In fact, they will keep you on track.
Right.
Once they're, they've memorized the schedule or whatever.
Yeah. That's why we got to make systems and structures to help support those kids.
Got it. So a predictable environment helps kids do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Your environment's predictable and consistent and repetitive.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Number 3.
Accountable forgiveness improves behavior in the long run.
Now it looks like you have them on your wall, right?
I do. Yeah, I have some of these up there.
I love that.
And accountable forgiveness is it's critical because we don't want to just forgive all the time and never have there be a consequence. 1, it's not realistic. 2, the kids aren't going to learn from it. So we want to hold them accountable. There should be a little bit of like, you could have done better, or that's not a thing. That's not part of our values, right? Circling back to that idea. But also helping the kid learn to internalize what is expected of them. If we just forgive the mistakes all the time and don't give a little bit of a like, and I'm not looking to cause guilt and shame, and I completely oppose shame, especially, even though it's hard to avoid. We want to minimize the use of guilt because it leads quickly to shame. But that doesn't mean you can't be kind of like surprised or offended or like, what's going on? Like, how come? And doing that in a gentle way, in a way that is both forgiving and also holding the kid accountable, which it sounds like it doesn't match, but it can be done relatively easily. It's going to help the kid improve their behavior because our kids want to please us, whether they're your students or your actual biological children or adopted children or whatever the case may be. Kids want to please adults. And so if we let them know that we're disappointed in what happened because they didn't succeed, but still leave the door open for approval, then they get a second effort at whatever it is that they messed up, whether it's messing up at cleaning the room, messing up at doing a test, or preventing themselves from calling out in class, whatever it is, as long as we leave that door open for approval later, they're going to try to figure out how to get that approval. And that's what I mean when I say accountable forgiveness. We help them own the mistake. We want them to do that. But we also let them know that this mistake does not color the rest of their lives. And this is particularly true in schools. That's a little tricky because a major message at school is that you can't bounce back from mistakes. And it's just because of the pace of a school. You take the test, you fail the test, too bad for you, we're moving on to a new topic. And if you want to make up that test and fix that error, the only way to do it is by suffering some personal consequence. You can stay after school to make up the test, but first you have to stay after school and study with me. You can come before school to make up the test. You can stay in for lunch and do it. All of that is affecting my time to myself away from school, and I don't want to do any of those things. But it's just the nature of how schools work. It's not intentionally a punishment, but that doesn't mean it's not a punishment.
Right, right. Right. So being accountable, holding them accountable, but being able to forgive them for it. And you know what I've realized working with kids with ADHD is that they'll often lie, and a lot of times it will be because the forgiveness isn't there. It's not okay to make a mistake. And so they'll
Yeah.
lie about it to get out of it. And I think this seems like it could be a strategy to help with the lying, help overcome that lying, or at least reduce it to
Yeah.
a little more acceptable.
Because if it's safe for me to mess up and it's safe for me to tell you that I messed up, then I don't have to lie.
Right.
Kids aren't lying out of disrespect. Kids are lying usually to protect themselves.
Right.
And if we've responded to those lies in a way that is overbearing and deeply judgmental and makes them feel bad about themselves, all we're doing is encouraging them to lie more.
Right.
But if we can forgive them for the lying and then forgive them for the mistake they were trying to cover up, they'll stop lying in the long run. It might not happen right away, but in the long run, it will.
Awesome. All right. So number 3, accountable forgiveness improves behavior in the long run. What is number 4?
Geography matters. And I don't mean the subject, right?
Okay.
Where we put things in our home, in our classroom, is going to affect the behavior of the kids. It's going to affect their ability to succeed, the frequency of their failures.
Okay, so this is beyond the predictable environment, right? That's
Yeah.
the consistency of it. This is specifically where you're putting things in the classroom.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
And so an example here is if you've got a kid who is coming into your room and consistently putting their backpack like off to the side, right? Or they come home from school and they drop their coat on a chair. They're telling you that that's a good place for a storage unit. Like that's a good place to put something to hold the bag, hold the coat, right? And if we cooperate with that need, that geographic need, they're going to meet with success more often.
Mm-hmm.
If there's some reason that we can't, we need to communicate with them around where's a better place to put it and try to figure out why they're not using that better place in the first place. Because there probably is a better place and they're just not using it. So we got to figure out how come. What's the reason that you're not putting your homework in the pass it in bin, for example, right? Is it because the pass it in bin is on my desk and you're a kid who doing homework makes you nervous, talking to the teacher makes you nervous, and so coming to my desk to turn in your homework makes you nervous, and so you don't turn in the homework? Is that what's going on? Or is it because the pass it in bin is visibly behind you, like you just can't see it?
Right.
And because it's behind you, you never turn in your homework because you don't have that visual reminder. Those kinds of geography skills, not like capitals and states and stuff, but location-based activities within the classroom and within the home are critical. And it also requires some flexibility on the part of the adults, because there might be stuff that works great for us but doesn't work for our kids, and too bad for us, because we want to have them succeed, and they just don't always have to bend to our will. We are allowed to cater to their needs as well.
Got it. Yeah, and you are it's almost like being intuitive. You're putting things in intuitive locations to
Hmm.
for them to comply. And
Yeah, it's a lot like most kids on an IEP have that like preferred seating thing somewhere in the IEP or the 504 preferential seating.
Mhm.
And a lot of, especially early teachers, think that means the front of the room. It's not what it means. It means that they need to be seated away from distractions. Or I had a kid that I taught who loved to be the star of the show. That was his whole deal. So I sat him in the far back corner of the room and then called on him, and he got to share his stuff. He stopped talking as much because he could see everybody. He knew I was going to call on him and that he would be the center of attention with the entire audience of the class visible to him whenever he shared. And having that entire audience of the class visible made him feel better about the information that he did share. So he called out less because he got more feedback for each time that he was called on.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking the opposite. Having them in the front and center was the place to be. But yeah,
Right.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I mean, my co-teachers thought I was crazy. They were like, what are you doing? I was like, I think it's going to work. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is what's up with this kid. Like, this is his jam. He needs an audience. Let's see what happens. I'm happy to move him if it doesn't work. But if it works, he's staying there for the rest of the year as long as he doesn't mind. Stayed there for the rest of the year. Loved it. Had no issue at all. Didn't even want to go to the other corner.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. So geography matters. Number 4. What's number 5?
Dig deeper. And just keep wondering. The way I usually say this is there's no such thing as lazy. Right? When we say that a kid is lazy or oppositional, those are usually the two that come up most often. We are quitting on that kid. We're done. Well, I know what that kid's problem is. He's lazy. Really? You think so? What if he lacks skills? What if he has a home life that is a horrible nightmare? What if her older sister died and we don't even know? There's 100 reasons why that kid might seem lazy. And as we know, ADHD kids, we get called lazy a lot. Part of what got me doing workshops was I reviewed a special education form at a school I was interning in for the guidance stuff that said that being lazy was a symptom of ADHD. And I was like, no, it's a side effect. If you give those kids with ADHD the proper job, the proper motivation or goal, they'll work like a terrier. Like, they will not let go of it. But if you don't figure out how to crack that nut and they don't know how to do the thing that you're asking of them, eventually they're going to give up. And that looks like lazy, but it's a lot more tragic than that. It's a kid who has given up. Laziness, as far as I'm concerned, is learned helplessness brought on by a lack of skills. It's not a real thing. And we have to try to figure out what's hiding underneath that word of lazy. And the same is true with oppositional. That kid's not being disrespectful. That kid's not being oppositional. We have a communication issue. And we have to adjust our communication with that kid so that they feel heard, so that they feel validated, and so that they understand and can do whatever it is that we're asking of them.
Got it. Yeah. So number 5 is dig deeper, and that's digging deeper into some of these behaviors that you see in your children. Why is it happening? And dig deeper into it, and notice when you've come to a conclusion that is kind of where you've really think you've got it and you think you dial it in. They're lazy, but it's actually you've kind of given up digging deeper.
Yeah.
Actually go deeper with that. And
especially if you're an experienced teacher, I saw this a lot with the more experienced teachers, where if you're going, no, I've seen this kind of kid before, he's just lazy. I've seen this kind of kid before, she's just disrespectful. If you're throwing out they're just, you're wrong. Just assume you're wrong and keep looking.
Got it. It's almost like you're being lazy by doing it because
Yep.
you don't want to dig deeper.
Absolutely.
And I understand that, right? You've got 30, 35 kids that you're handling. It's like, that's a large load. You want to be able to use your experience and move on. But what you're saying is with ADHD kids, especially, you want to dig a little deeper and go to the next level. And
and I'm not here to to like berate teachers or make teachers feel bad. That's absolutely not my job. It's not my perspective on anything. The nature of this kind of event is that we're talking about areas of struggle and areas that can be improved. So I hope I'm not coming across as a judgmental jerk, because that's not my jam.
Yeah.
I am using some of my worst case scenarios with people that I've worked with in the past to illustrate some points, but I am completely pro teacher. I've been a teacher. My sister's a teacher. My brother-in-law's a teacher. I'm a big fan of education. But I also recognize that, you get burnt out a little bit and you start to forget to look deeper, and you just have to go back to that. That's all. It's just a friendly reminder.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I think teachers watching this understand the massive amount of respect we have for them. And in fact, a large part of why we're putting on this toolbox is because I'm sure a large part of why you do ADHD Essentials is to help teachers. So teachers and students and parents. So
yeah. I just if I can real quick, I don't want to, I feel like I didn't do a good job of giving an example for that dig deeper thing. Okay. And I want to make sure that I do.
Let's go for it.
The number one strategy that I used when I taught, and that I used as a principal, is if a kid is struggling, I would take them to the side, like out in the hallway, away from all the other kids, right? And when they're calling out a lot, when they're not doing homework, whatever it is, whatever we're banging heads over, I would bring them out in the hall, for example, and I would say, we're banging heads, and I don't want to bang heads with you. And usually when you call a kid out in the hall, they're expecting to get in trouble. So sometimes I'd send them out in the hall like I was going to explode and lose my whole entire mind at them. And then I'd immediately change my demeanor to this very calm, caring perspective and totally throw them off, because I'm trying to get them off balance. So maybe I get more information. Yeah. But I would say, we're banging heads. I don't want to bang heads with you. That's not how I want this relationship to work. I'm not totally sure why we're banging heads. So this is what I need. This is your homework. You don't have any other homework. This is all I want you to do. Go home, figure out what you need me to do so that you can do the things that I need you to do. And what I need from you is X, Y, and Z, whatever that is. I don't want you to feel like you're on the spot. I'm not telling you have to tell me right now. And I do that on purpose so they have that processing time and they can reflect and all that stuff. But your homework tonight is to go home and just figure out what you need from me, and we'll have a conversation tomorrow, before class, after class, maybe in the middle, depending on what's going on. And just let me know what you need, because I want to give you the stuff that you need so that you can give me what I need. Because the fact is, I'm the teacher. I have the power. So if they're not giving me what I need, I'm the one who has to change, because I've got the power in the relationship.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love the fact that you're using your experience as a teacher and a principal and just kind of, sharing these 5 principles today. To help kids manage behavior, or help teachers and parents help children manage behavior. So that's awesome.
And I've done that with my kids too, by the way.
You've implemented these strategies.
Yeah. Including we're banging heads and I don't want to bang heads anymore. What do you need from me?
Got it. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this information. Again, if you're looking for more information, you'd like to hear some of Brenden's over 100 podcasts that he has available, go to ADHDessentials.com, and you can find him on his website. Are you available on iTunes or Spotify or any place like that?
All of them.
All of them.
You should be able to find me. And there's an ADHD Essentials Facebook community, if that's useful for people as well. It's just ADHD Essentials community.
Fantastic. So you can find Brenden on all those locations. And Brenden, thank you so much. As a free gift, we're going to put it down below as a link. Brenden has his 5 ways to improve kids' behavior at school and at home listed. It's not a checklist. It is detailed, and probably say a little bit of some of the things that we didn't say on the podcast on the show here. So you did make sure you download that and check it out. It'll go a little bit deeper than we did. And Brenden, thank you so much for being on our program and sharing your experience and your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate the time.
Awesome. And thank you all for being on this episode and watching this episode of the ADHD Toolbox. And we'll see you on the next episode.